Hi friends, it's Kim Schofield back with another video on my YouTube channel after a very long time away from my YouTube channel. I am hoping to be back and be posting a few more videos more frequently. Today we're going to be talking about decorative die cuts, and I'm going to be featuring or showing some products from Altenew and Ranger. So let's get started. So to start with, I have some large dies. So I have a Thinking of You die that's from Altenew, and also a You Are Loved die from Altenew. I do find that the larger dies work better for this technique. To get started, before I get to decorating the die, I'm first going to create a base layer for my first card. This is the Thinking of You card. So I have an Altenew Ferns set. This is a great set. It's a little bit older, um, but I have just now broken it out because I have been super busy with moving into a new home, and we did a ton of renovations, which is why I have been away from my YouTube channel for such a long time. We basically gutted the entire downstairs of the house, and we were living in temporary housing for about a month, and then living in just the upstairs of our house for about another month. So I just now have kind of started to get things organized. I got my craft room set back up. So I apologize if it's not great yet. Some of the lighting might be a little off, etc. But I really wanted to start trying out some of the new products that I bought months ago, and have kind of just been sitting collecting dust. So I was excited to get back and to start a video that I haven't done in ages, and be able to share a technique that I've kind of been thinking about for a while. So I started here with I'm working in my mini Misty, and am so the Altenew stamps are wonderful layered stamps. So I am just basically what I'm doing is stamping a bunch of these ferns. I'm using 3 colors for this. I'm also using Altenew inks for this. So I started out, I think there might be 4 colors in the greens, but I only used 3. I used the light, the like the third shade up, like the lightest, and then skipped a shade, and then the third shade and the darkest shade of the 4 green colors. And you'll see all the products will be listed in the description area so you can see what I used. So you can see you get beautiful results with this, and just, I love their products. So I ended up stamping a whole bunch of these ferns, and then I um, used the matching die, the coordinating dies, to cut them all out. So I'm not going to use all of them in this, but I just wanted to create a background. So I am working with some Wendy Vecchi, I think it's Perfect Card Adhesive, and it is great. I love this liquid glue. It dries really quickly, it dries clear, and it gives you just that little bit of time to move something around, if to get that right position. So all I'm doing, and I am working, by the way, on my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station, which I love. I'm obsessed with this thing because these magnets hold everything, and it makes crafting super easy. So all I'm doing here is applying some of my fern images, and I'm cutting off the excess, and I'll continue to do this to cover the entire background. And then I take some of the pieces that I've cut and fill them in there on the edges. So my base layer there is finished. You can see some of those. Yeah, my ATG gun is toast. It's time after about 10 years to get a new one. You can see some of those ferns are kind of overlapping in the center, but that's going to be covered up, so you're not going to see that. So let's get on to decorating our die cut. So, oh, by the way, this is another great use for the station. I've got the 2 little dots for my thinking held under one of those big magnets, so I don't lose those 2 little dots. So all I'm going to do to get started here is I'm just using some of the Altenew inks with a blending tool, and I'm just applying some color. So I kind of want to get a little bit of a gradient going from the lighter to a little bit darker, and then the top area I'm actually going to leave white. So it'll kind of gradually go from this darker green to the lighter green up to the white. And I'm continuing to use my magnets to hold the die cut in place. So you could also keep the die cut in the piece of paper and not take it out, but I had already taken it out. And so the magnets worked perfectly to hold that while I inked everything up. So now I wanted to add a little bit of embossing to the bottom of this. And, as I'm thinking about decorating die cuts, especially with the words. If you get these larger dies, which I think it works better with the larger dies, you could stamp on top of them or stencil. I kind of did a little bit of inking on both of my samples and then also some embossing. So I'm using copper tinsel embossing powder, which is really beautiful from Ranger, on only the bottom portion. So once I add it, and it's really kind of imperfect, which is what I wanted. It's not a perfect line across. I really wanted this to be kind of organic looking where the embossing powder was. So I'm just coming back in after the fact and adding a little bit more of that darker green and the lighter green. And then I also added some ink onto the two little dots that will be in thinking. So I also die cut this. I apologize for that sound on my computer, which keep a reminder there. So I did also die cut the Thinking of You from a piece of fun foam, and I'm just gluing that on top using that Wendy Vecchi liquid adhesive. And so we'll just let that dry. And now you can see I covered up the middle part there of the card just with some of the matching green cardstock and then some white, just so that the die stands out. And then now with that craft foam, you get some nice dimension there to that die cut. And it really is kind of fun. It's not just white or just a color, but you've got that graduated inking and then also that really cool copper tinsel embossing powder at the bottom. So I'm just using a pickup stick to go ahead and add those little dots on there, and I'm done with the first card. So the second card features another Altenew die, You Are Loved. And again, this is die cut out of some Nina Solar White cardstock. And I've cut that out a couple of times so you can see if you wanted to do inking, like I'm going to do here, you can leave it, not take that die cut out. And this makes it a little bit easier. So now I'm just going to use some Distress Oxide inks, and these blend together so beautifully. They're so creamy. And this is actually a color combination that Christina Werner had shared, oh gosh, maybe not that long ago, within the past month or 6 weeks. She did a whole Distress Oxide video series. And so this was a color palette that she had put together, and they really do look fantastic together. So all I'm really working on is just adding some fun colors onto the die cuts. And again, you could go ahead and stencil. I think that would look really cool to add some design, or even stamp on top of the die cuts before you punch this out or from the paper. So I am drying the oxide inks because they do stay wet a little bit longer, and I don't want to end up, getting fingerprints all over everything, but it doesn't take much to dry that off. And so when I punch that out, you'll have this really beautifully blended die cut, which you can see here. And then I'm going to use you could use a craft knife or a little pokey tool, a pick to just get the little centers of all of the letters pushed out. So I think there's some other really fun die cuts. I have some that have scenes, and I think they would be super fun to do some really fun decorated techniques with as well. So I do have these punched out 3 times or die cut 3 times, and that's just so I can layer them. Yes, they're all different colors. This was just me playing around with them, so it's no big deal. You don't see the rest of those colors when they're all stacked together and glued together. So now I wanted to create a drop shadow, and so I've die cut the same thing again, and now I'm going to emboss the whole piece in silver embossing powder. And so you may have seen techniques where maybe you use a dark cardstock to go behind the die cuts, but I thought adding this silver shimmer would really be fun as a drop shadow. And so I'm just going to go ahead and heat this with my heat tool, and you can tell when the embossing powder is melting because it gets nice and shiny. And I really don't have to worry too much about the entire piece being perfect because you're really only going to see a little portion of it once I, remove this from the paper. So here's that silver piece. And now when I put my um, ink colored piece on top, you can see that you get this little bit of shimmer that shows behind in the drop shadow, which I thought looked really fun. So just another way to decorate your die cuts instead of just doing a straightforward, white cardstock or something on your die cut. So, and now using the liquid glue is really helpful because I can slide that around a little bit until, I have everything lined up the way I want. So now I'm going to actually create a shaker card for this card. So I took two Spellbinder dies and I created a little frame. And I did that 3 times just so I can get a little bit of stability because this is very kind of thin frame. And also, so it's a little bit thicker and more substantial when it's on the front of my card. So this die cut is really a really good size, which you'll see that on the finished card. And so it's really going to be kind of the feature of the entire card is that really pretty colored die cut. So that's going to go right in the center there. So now I just have a piece of clear acetate. I actually think it's a piece of packaging from something, so you can use that. You just clean it up a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and just glue that onto my frame. And then I'm taking my, this is, like I said, it's pretty thin. So I'm taking my double-sided tape and I've cut it down. And you can actually, this is a good way to save on your foam tape. You can cut it into 3 times. You can cut down the width so you can get more for your money. So I'm going to set that aside. And now since this is going to be a shaker, I wanted to include some of these little teeny stars, which are from Wendy Vecchi. She has matte minis and they come in black or white. So this is the white, and I'm just going to emboss some of them in the silver embossing powder so I can punch those out and include those in my shaker, which I thought would be really fun. Be able to see some little stars behind there. And by the way, she has a ton of matte minis. These are super fun, really heavy duty, thick chipboard, kind of like a chipboard. And she has all kinds of shapes and sizes, some that coordinate with her stamps as well. So this is really fun. And you could do a whole sheet of these in the silver embossing powder, and then you just have them ready to go to add as accents on on the outside of a card, or in my case, to use in the shaker. So I'm going to let that cool before I punch out those little stars. Um, and I'm going to go ahead and fill. So I've got some iridescent sequins, and then I have a few kind of silvery ones in this little mix here. And I apologize, I have no idea who these sequences are from. I've had them for ages. So I can't link to anything, but there are a ton of companies that sell sequins. And so you can get these colors from, a lot of different manufacturers. Then I'm going to just go ahead and use my craft knife to poke out some of these stars. And I am going to make sure that I turn them so that the silver part is, the embossed part is showing through the front. So you could emboss both sides if you wanted to, but this is going to be pretty tight. So they're not going to move around too much. They'll stay. So here's one of the best things about Wendy's station is for stenciling. So this is a Tim Holtz stencil, and I'm just using a Ranger archival ink. It's a very light gray color, and I'm just stenciling this onto a 5x5 card base. So I love this because you can put the magnets down, stencil where you want to stencil, and then pick up one of the magnets and pick up the stencil so you can see if you've got the right coverage. Especially for this one, the lines were really thin. And so I had to really kind of scrub to get that color in there. And so it was helpful to be able to check that, um, without the stencil moving or the design moving. So I'm just putting a piece of plain cardstock on top. I did not want the plaid showing through. So I'll go ahead and put that will go on top of the plaid. So this is a 5x5 card. I'm just scoring it here and using a bone folder, make sure I get a really good score line. Forget about my ATG gun because it is toast. I completely need a new one. So here's another great use for the station is to hold the card down while you're adding anything on top. So it really keeps it, the little ruler at the bottom makes sure that, everything is even. And then I'm going to go ahead and just glue my decorated die cut right on top there. I could glue it all. I just glued it to the frame part, but I could glue it onto the acetate as well. And then if any glue comes out, it does dry clear, but it also wipes up really easily with a paper towel. So that is just about it for me today. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be back. I'm hoping to be posting videos a little more frequently now. Be sure to visit my blog for more photos, and the description for that is in or the link to that is in the description below, along with links to any of the products that I used today. Happy crafting!